Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. I know it's been a while, but I've been busy the last few months getting married and taking a much needed break. It was absolutely incredible and thank you all for your patience while I was away. But now I'm back, the batteries are recharged and my brush are thirsty. And it's time to get back to the realms of the dead and give to this spectral legion the attention it deserves. Before the break, we started this Nighthaunt army, and today we are diving into the heart of it all. This is the most ambitious painting project on the channel so far, and I'm going to paint the large majority of my army, and to do that I need to be as quick and efficient as possible. My plan has a few parts. First, I'm going to create a bit of variation by painting my 3 types of troops cloaks in different colors to help better distinguish them on the battlefield. And as you can see, I already have some miniatures painted from before my break, but not being happy with the already massive workload on my shoulders, and having decided for a few changes in the color scheme, I decided to repaint those miniatures as well. The first thing I'm going to paint are all the metallic parts. I paint them first, so I can be a bit more messy and use my dry brush without risking ruin on the cloak and the spectral skin later on. I'll be painting all the parts that I precedently painted silver with a very dark cold bronze. I want to tell the story of these chains and weapons being subjected to the decay of thousands of years of battle, now made of almost pure rust and bringing a terrifying death to anyone who stands in their way. In addition, the darker metallic skin is going to work perfectly with my already painted Lady Olinder and Knight of Shrouds. To start, I mix my bronze with some black in a 60% bronze to 40% black mix and apply this base coat all over the metallic parts. To add more depth and to push back the shiny appearance of the bronze even more, I applied a black wash all over it. Once that was dry, I went back to the original mix and added some pure bronze to highlight only the most exposed areas. Right now, the bronze is a little too polished for the final effect I was aiming for, but don't worry, that's all part of the plan. We're coming back later to the metallics to finish them off. With a lot of miniatures to paint in a short amount of time, another very brilliant idea was to paint the cloak of those miniatures with different colors. My plan is to give to the most imposing Glaivewraith Stalkers and Grimghast Reapers a more bluish undertone. The bigger surfaces of these miniatures is going to give me more space to play with my spectral transitions and to create that ghostly cloak. Meanwhile, the rest of the horde is going to get a more distinct greenish undertone. So for the elite troops of this army, I started by mixing dark Prussian blue with periscope and a touch of dark green. That dark green helps me keep the blue on the spectral side of things and to tie it with the general tones of the army. I applied this mix to all the cloak surfaces. For the Chainrasps horde, I followed a similar process by mixing dark Prussian blue with emerald green in a 50-50 mix, which makes the green far more noticeable and helps creating depth in the shadow areas. With the base coats down, the layering process is where we are really going to push the difference between these two color schemes. Starting with the Chainrasp horde, I applied a wash of black, green and blue to add more depth in the shadow areas. After the wash was dry, I started the highlighting phase. I gradually added more and more emerald to the original mix, focusing on painting the areas that are facing the light source shining from above. This becomes more visible the more we proceed. As you can see, the areas I highlight are getting always smaller and more focused towards the top part of the miniature. This helps to sell the effect that the lowest part is also the farthest from the light. To give it the final pop, I applied the last 2 layers of highlight with pure light emerald green at first, and then by adding a touch of ghostly green to it. This last touch really makes the models glow, giving that fluorescent ghostly green effect to the horde, especially in contrast with the strong and deep shadows that I painted earlier. Now, for the rest of my army, I wanted to do something different. Color scheme aside, I wanted to take advantage of having more room to play with colors and transitions. I started highlighting them the same way I did with the Chain Horde, by progressively adding more light blue-green and ghostly green to the original mix. This time, as I reduced the highlighted area and focused more towards the top, I also applied these lighter colors with almost full coverage over the lower trailing parts of the cloak, and especially on the fog the Reapers seems to be summoned from. I think that this is going to make these models look like they are ephemeral creatures with intangible bodies almost generating from thin air. The last regular highlight layer for both the top and the bottom section of the miniatures is pure light blue-green. Then, to enhance the ghostly allure and to sell the effect of those cruel beings materializing from thin air, I applied 2 dry brush layers. A first layer where I added ghostly green and white to my last highlight mix, to create that ghostly glow that I also created for my Chain Horde, and a final layer with just a touch of pure white. Here's a little tip: to avoid that chalky dusty effect, I always dampen my dry brush on a moist sponge, and I also moisturize a little the paper towel I use to unload most of the paint. This leaves just enough moisture for a perfect blend. The last detail I paint are the flames with pure white. I wait to paint the flames even further because I want to see if I have time to paint some OSL, so I want to have everything painted before painting the flame reflections. Now, to create that dead looking skin, I'm going to use the same color that I have used across the army. A pale violet that is going to work beautifully with the greens and the blues of this skin. I start laying down a base coat of light violet to set the main tone, trying to get an even coverage. To create the shadows and darken down the skin tone a little bit, a simple purple wash applied all over the skin does the trick perfectly. For the final highlight, I'm going to mix the initial violet with a bit of ivory to slightly desaturate the color. As I mentioned earlier, I wasn't quite done with the metallic parts, so now it's time to add the final touches. To create the effect of an old oxidized metal, I grabbed Vallejo's special effects green rust and applied it along the metallic surfaces. I mainly focused on the recesses, like the chain joints, the rivets, the sword hilt, and also on the wider surfaces, paying attention not to get too close to the blade edges. Once the special paint is dry, it turns really opaque, almost chalky, selling that old oxidized bronze effect perfectly. Now, a lot of the miniatures that I'm painting are holding spears, and to paint the handle of those spears I don't want to use my usual brown recipe. To keep it coherent with the overall army tone, I think it's better to opt for a darker, more desaturated brown. My go-to choice here is dark rust as base coat, which is then highlighted with a mix of dark rust and ivory, trying my best to mimic and follow the wood grain and knots. As you may have noticed, there are only 2 parts left to paint, the small flames, which are currently just white, and the bases. Wanting to recreate a small OSL effect, I think that painting the bases first is going to allow me to easily integrate the light on the whole miniature in the end. So I paint all the headstones in Dawnstone Grey, and to highlight it I take a sponge that I dip into some sky grey, and after damping it on a piece of paper I start applying this color all over the most raised areas and edges of the headstones. To prep the ground I apply an even black base coat. This is going to give me a nice foundation to start building up that grey and desolate floor. To highlight the floor I grabbed my dry brush and some dark sea grey. That's not much, but I don't need to paint it properly, I just need to highlight the textures, and later you're gonna see why. I also want to recreate a small amount of vegetation on these bases, by applying some random dots of PVA glue, and then by immersing it in some static grass. After a few seconds, I remove it and knock away all the excess, paying attention not to flatten the grass down. As you can see, the grass has a pretty vivid and intense color, which is a bit too much for this color scheme, but don't worry, we're going to fix that later. The last thing I'm going to add is a nice layer of snow, which helps keep it coherent with the concept I had when I first painted a few of these miniatures. So I grab my tools and start applying it on most of the surface. I think that putting them in a snowy environment is going to enhance that chilling creepy effect that I want for my ghostly army. Once everything was in place, I took an old brush and dry brushed a mix of light blue-green and white over the grass and the snow, tinting them towards a more ethereal tone. And now the part that we've all been waiting for, the flames and the OSL effect. To paint the flames, I thought that using Hexwraith flames and a blue ink would have created a very interesting effect. I start by applying Hexwraith flames on the top and middle parts of the flame, and then wet blend it down with the blue ink, creating a very interesting gradient. For the OSL, not wanting it to overpower the scene, I opted to only apply it on the most reflective metal surfaces and the snow surrounding the flames area. So I started applying a very thin layer of Hexwraith flame and blue mix over those areas, followed by pure Hexwraith flames, reducing the area with each layer. In my opinion, this will create the effect of a dim light coming from those spectral flames. And finally, after painting the rim of the base black, this was the final result. Well everyone, that's it for today. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and why not, maybe found some inspiration to try on your own miniatures. Let me know in the comments what you think of the final result, and if you have any question, feel free to ask them. I can't wait to move on the bigger centerpiece models of this army, and trust me, I have something really special in mind for Nagash. So if you don't want to miss it, please consider subscribing and leaving a like to show your support. And while I head back to my painting desk, as always, don't forget to keep moving forward into this big minis world.